Paradox games in general are rather notorious for having a steep learning curve and what is usually considered to be a relatively bad tutorial. This means that a lot of features that are in the game aren't necessarily signaled to the player, which means that there can be a lot of confusion out there. Now today we're going to go and dive into some of these mechanics. I've done this before in the past and it seemed to be received relatively well, but today we're going to be diving into some of the nitty and gritty system. We're going to go into some of the more mechanical stuff and hopefully make your lives a little bit better. Let's dive in, shall we? Here's a scenario you've probably bumped in at one time or another, and that is the joys of having to deal with massive overpopulation on all your planets or other orbitals that you may or may not have. There is a good way around this though. You don't really have to download a mod off the workshop to get around this. No, all you have to do is go into the galactic community and actually go into the resolutions and then specifically underneath greater good, get to greater than ourselves. Not only does it ban a bunch of very interesting living standards like basic subsistence and stratified economy, but it also removed chattel slavery, livestock grid amalgamation from the allowed types of citizenship that you can have. But this is not the big thing. The big thing here is a edict, and it's not particularly clear on this particular screen that there is an edict. All you can see is that there is a influence cost with an effect underneath it, and that effect is the most important part. Now I've set up for this little example a little ring world over here, and as you can see this is all ready to go. It's got some districts on it, and first of all what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that only the workers will fill up first, and then later on the specialists. Normally pops will want to navigate themselves towards the specialist jobs first, but in this particular case they will fill up the worker jobs first, or at least in this particular case the clerk jobs. Then we go into our influence and go to greater than ourselves now that we have unlocked it and click it. All we gotta do now is unpause and watch them go. Oh yes, the rising unemployment. Yeah, that will no longer be a problem very soon anymore, as consumer goods will start to become a problem. As we keep this one open, you can see that pops will start to move over towards this ring world all by themselves. We no longer have to go into the resettlement screen and make sure that we have the right amount of pops and in the right locations, because that would just take forever, especially when we want to fill up a ring world. There we go. It's 5 out of 20. Not bad. All the other segments as well. Yeah, they're filling up nice and quickly. And that is exactly what we want. All these jobs are now being automatically filled up by our pops from different locations. Void Home, for instance, still has 2 pops available. That's not a problem because, well, as you can see, they are slowly but steadily making their way over towards their location, or at least their destination. And now the worker jobs are filled up. We can do this with the researchers as well, and that's more popular, therefore these will fill up a lot quicker. So what does this mean? It means that you can, in the mid to late game, deal with population controls a lot easier by just setting up planets with a lot of districts, especially if you have a lot of overpopulation on some of your other locations, and all your pops will automatically start to move themselves to places that don't have any that have any jobs available, which means that you can get rid of overpopulation really easily without ever having to go into this horrible resettlement screen. Now that the population is starting to fill up in this system, we need to go and take a look at how this is going to affect our factions. Factions by themselves is a screen that people don't necessarily look at all that often because there is just not a lot of stuff to do here. There's no events attached to this or anything else, which is sadly a thing in the game right now. Not a lot of internal politics, but it doesn't mean that this is not an important screen, because this is where you get all your influence from, at least until you get will to power in the Unity ambitions. So right now, for instance, this particular faction is giving us 1.2 influence per month, which is a gigantic amount. Some of the other ones a lot lower, mainly because we are suppressing them. But we don't have a lot of factions. Why? Because we are keeping our factions under control by using government ethics attraction. And government ethics attraction is a very nebulous subject within the game. It's not particularly clear all the time what it does. But it does, in this particular case, is making sure that your pops stay in the right ethics as well as in the right factions, which means that you have an easier time controlling where your influence is coming from. All of these factions will have to generate their own demands. For instance, these guys want free movement, or these guys don't want robots, etc. So how do we control this? Well, well, there is a really cool building in the game that not a lot of people seem to be using, and I do feel this is a big failure on the tutorialization of the game because it's not really explained very well. If we go into the starbase over here, this particular starhold, we go to the building option, we scroll down, we see all the cool stuff like listening posts or trading companies or fleet academies, stuff that is directly useful for your economy or your fleet. However, there is one building that is completely unique, and that is the Deep Space Black Site. What does the Deep Space Black Site do? Well, it improves governing ethics attraction in the system, which means that your pops will naturally flow towards your governing ethics groups, as in this particular case, the wonders of xenophiles and materialists. So if you have a system with a lot of pops inside of it, it's always a good idea to build that Deep Space Black Site for those governing ethics attraction. Plus, you get a bonus of +5 stability, which means all your pops will generate more resources, and who doesn't want to have that? Deep Space Black Sites, build them, because the government will come for you and make sure that you follow the tenets of the factions. So the next tip may be really straightforward to some of you, but some others may not have really used this particular system, but I do highly recommend you to use it because it will make your lives a lot easier. If we go into our outliner, we find ourselves a place, let's say this refinery station over here. We go to the planetary summary and we see that we have a building slot available. Building slots are, of course, useful because they use specialists in most cases. And if we go there, we will be presented with this giant list, especially in the post-mid-game. The list will just get longer and longer, and there will be so many buildings here for you to choose and pick. And this can be a problem, especially if you know what you want to do with a particular orbital or a planet. Let's say you want to build an orbital completely up to be full of fortresses. We have to scroll all the way down to the fortress option or the stronghold option, and this is going to take time. It's going to take a lot of effort, and it's just busy work for the sake of busy work. However, what you could instead do is use the quick buttons above the construction building menu. Here's the army button. We'll take you straight to the stronghold. Or if you need to build something in your economy, commercial zones and the Galactic Stock Exchange are immediately here, or labs. This is a great way to very quickly navigate between the different buildings that are available within your empire, and you should definitely use this particular system. This, for instance, this entire space station is all about alloys, so we can just go and navigate to manufacturing, build ourselves an alloy foundry right off the get-go without having to scroll back and forth. And that is incredibly useful, and it will save you a lot of headache. Being able to navigate the UI quickly and efficiently is definitely there. The buttons are there, but you should know to learn them because it will make your life so much easier. Quality of life option there. What a lot of you will know already is that pops are life, and sometimes getting pops quickly is really important to get your economy up and running, especially at the start of the game. Now, in some scenarios, what you can do is you can survey your planet over here, this here arid world, which is relatively straightforward, but we can't colonize it all at the moment because we haven't claimed this system. That is a problem, because if we would go in here, if the system was colonized, we would need to go and build the actual colony ship physically, which basically means we need to wait until the colony ship is done, which takes a year, then for it to fly over, which probably takes another year, etc., etc. This is what the game presents you as the standard de facto style of building colonies. It takes a lot of time, it's a very linear process, but you can totally do it in a different way. So let's quickly pop over towards this system over here that I've set up next door. As you can see, we have ourselves a little construction ship getting ready to finish production on this here space station. However, what I've already done is build a colony ship way ahead of this particular system being claimed and send it over towards the planet to be colonized. What you can do in the early game is really simple. Once you have the ability to build yourself a colony ship, you should probably go and build it, because once you have found yourself a planet that you can colonize, your colony ship will already be ready, and you can just send it over there as you wait for everything to be done. As you can see, this system is now online and ready to go. So let's quickly go and colonize this world. Let's give it a cool name. Nova Constantinople will do, and colony started. Okay. So, relatively straightforward, right? Okay, fair enough. Now we have to wait for the colony to be done. And that can take some time. Like, this one is going to take 2 years to colonize. 2 years and 3 months, which is a long-ass time. And we don't have time to wait for stuff to be developed on planet, because obviously we want to get pops over here and make sure the planet grows as fast as possible. And one of those things that we can avoid in terms of streamlining our building structure is making sure there are no planetary blockers in this system already, or at least on this planet. Because normally we would have some planet blockers here, and then we would need to build some districts, and then we need to remove those blockers, and these things take time, something that we usually don't have. However, in the colonization process, we can go towards the planetary feature button, and you will notice that we can already remove any blockers that we have the technology for to remove them. And this means that during the colonization process, we can automatically start removing these here tile blockers, which is incredibly useful down the line, because once it is time to expand your planet to the max, we don't have those blockers there, especially when you're trying to do something along the lines of getting blockers off of strategic resources like moats, gas, dust, and that sort of thing. Then we can make sure that those blockers aren't there during the colonization process. It is not a single button and waiting. We can do multiple things on this screen, and removing tile blockers is a really, really big part of that. Make sure that you remove your tile blockers once you can, whilst you're still colonizing a planet. You've just started a game, you're ready to rock and roll, to go out there into the wild yonder, conquer the enemy, and bring them asunder. And this is definitely something that can happen. You know, some players just want to play for conquest, some want to play for economy. What is, however, important is that at the start of the game, there is a chance, and you should definitely check up on this, that the initial ships are not the design that you would want. And that is the following. You do not want to have to pick a ship as your very first design. Always make sure you go into your ship designer before throwing yourselves at the enemy. It's very important that you do. Picket designs are not good. Always make sure you have the auto-generate design off, and then go into interceptor and just auto-complete, just so that you have a nice mix and match. Sure, the firepower on paper may be a little bit lower, but the point defense is just not good at all. Should you throw in maybe one Corvette with a picket design? Sure, because basically any stations you will encounter will have a missile turret on it, and the point defense will take down those missiles, so you will have an easier time taking down enemy stations. But your entire fleet should not consist of these types of ships. Always make sure that you have interceptors ready to deploy. Also, the AI sometimes has a lot of point defense on their ships, and you can counter this relatively easily by, well, not making sure you don't have point defense on your ships and proper weapons instead. So yeah, there you go. Make sure you have the right weapon set up on your ships at the start of the game. One thing that I feel the game is not really signaling all that much is the importance of using the right type of scientists on the right type of technology. But it goes a lot further than that. It also applies to anomalies. For instance, we'll give this anomaly over here. We have this particular scientist over here, and they are ready to go ahead and survey this planet. Now we can change the scientist and actually apply something a little bit more useful on this. Let's say that we want to get this scientist on there who is carefree. Carefree means that they will get more anomalies pop up in general. This one, for instance, is maniacal. Do we want to level this maniacal scientist? Absolutely, because maniacal scientist, it potentially gives us access to psionics a lot earlier than normal. So in this particular case, what we can do is we can actually reassign this particular scientist to this particular anomaly, and then they will start heading over there. If I can quickly find the scientist in question, it is this one. They will now start to prioritize this particular dig site, which is really important to get levels on your scientists. In addition, having a lot of scientists is incredibly useful, but only if those scientists are one of each category. If you quickly go into our leader tab here, you will notice that we have a lot of scientists, but they all have different specialties. And specialties are really, really good to optimizing your research output. For instance, if we go into our technology window, you will see that certain technologies are guided by certain principles. For instance, the colony development speed is controlled by computing, and we currently have an adaptable scientist on there. Is that optimal? Absolutely not. In a perfect world, we would have a computing scientist on this particular build, and we can do that because we have a scientist available of that particular type. We now have a bonus of 32%, whereas before, if I quickly pop over, if we can find said scientist, we'll just use this one. Yeah, now we have 17. And that's a huge bonus because we want to make sure that we have optimal research speed and research progress on every single technology that we can get. Please make sure that you rotate your scientists in and out all the time, but also make sure that you have the right scientists on the right mission. For instance, precursors, the anomaly events, take a lot of time because they are usually a very high level. You can use specific archaeologist scientists on those particular sites. However, if you need a certain type of scientist because an older one has died and you still need a specialist and you need a lot of levels on a certain scientist, make sure you send them out to get trained up and get them ready to be swapped in to the next science thing. Because doubling your research speed is a huge bonus and should not be underestimated. Optimize your scientists, people. It is the way to go, because science wins you the game, just like Pops do. Stellaris is definitely a game with a relatively steep learning curve, and I hope that today, with these tips, that you have managed to kind of skip part of said learning curve. Get ahead of the pack, so to speak. If you've learned something, feel free to give it in the comments below, and even if you haven't, but there are things out there that you would like to cover or let people know, feel free to leave a comment below. I'm really looking forward to see what you have to say about some of the more undocumented features within the game. I'm really looking forward to that discussion. I also want to thank my patrons for making this video possible, and in the meantime, here is some videos for you to enjoy. Here is some more tips for you to learn the game. It covers some more quality of life stuff, as well as a brand new playlist that covers all the new features within the game. This is a tutorial playlist, so please be aware of that. It's never a bad time to do some learning. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take good care of yourselves and, as always, each other.